Welcome to the Geek in Review, the podcast focused on innovative and creative ideas in the legal profession. I'm Marlene Gebauer.
And I'm Greg Lambert. So, Marlene, a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned another case where someone submitted a brief to a court that they used the generative AI tools, and we also referenced, once again, this is why we can't have good things in the legal industries.
I remember.
Well, turns out that although the facts behind this, somebody actually did submit a brief that had some hallucinating citations that were made up. I said it was the 10th Circuit Court, the federal court, and I was wrong. It's actually the 10th Court of Appeals here in Texas in Brazos County.
You're partially correct.
I was partially correct. I got the 10th part right?
50%.
Yeah. Well, apparently I sent some people up in Denver scrambling when they heard that at the actual 10th Circuit Court, and they reached out to me, and finally we figured it out that it wasn't them. It was my mistake. So sorry about that. I'll try to be a little more careful the next time and not rely upon ChatGPT to write all of my introduction here.
Well, thank you very much for catching it for us. So we do apologize for the mistake. But enough of Greg's apologies for past episodes. Let's jump into this week's episode with a couple of great guests from LegalMation. We'd like to welcome Thomas Suh, founder, COO, and board member of LegalMation, a legal technology company focused on assisting litigators with AI tools, and Ken Block, senior account executive at LegalMation. Thomas and Ken, welcome to the Geek in Review.
For having us.
Thanks for having us.
So I know we go back. I know Ken and I go back a good ways. But Thomas, do you mind just kind of starting us off by giving an overview of what LegalMation does and a bit of the history behind why you started the company?
Sure. Try to keep it as short as possible. Being an ex-lawyer litigator, that's asking for a lot. But so we are focused exclusively on automating a lot of the, better way to put it, a lot of the scut work that litigators and legal professionals in litigation do. The cutting and pasting, some of the digging up prior samples and information to respond to lawsuits or discovery requests or demand letters, all those things that no one going to law school dreams about doing when they start working. And the reality is that we all had to do that as young associates, and it was par for the course, and something that, of course, you can bill for. Obviously, you're I don't know what the rates are now for associates in New York, but I presume $500 per hour is probably not out of the realm. Whether you're in trial or whether you're cutting and pasting, you're still charging for the same rate, and so. There was really very little incentive to do anything more efficiently. Well, we decided to, I was managing a law firm before this, and we decided to experiment with AI. This is about maybe initially the idea was drawn up about 7 years ago. One of the moments that really spurred us into looking into this was one evening I'm walking down the hall, and I see one of our associates working late at night. Now, this is probably 11 o'clock at night or so. Some attorneys here may say, well, that's nothing.
I was going to say, it's like
yeah, exactly.
It's sort of late, maybe.
It's still part of the 10th day, exactly. Anyway, let's just say it was kind of late. And I asked, what are you doing? And of course he said, well, I'm working on discovery responses. We have a case, and this discovery I'm working on. So I said, well, when is this due? And he said, well, it's, we got to respond by tomorrow. And I said, tomorrow? You're still working on this, and the client has to review, most likely, and you have to maybe go back and forth a couple of times. And his response was very telling. his response was, well, I hate doing this part of my job so much that I procrastinate until the very, very end. So I can't say that was the moment. Obviously, my co-founder, James, really ultimately came up with the idea for the company and some of the tasks that we're going to automate. But that was one of those moments where I remember going back now and asking ourselves, well, that's the kind of stuff that machines should be doing, computers should be doing, so that we can focus on higher value work. Everyone talks about it, but no one puts it into practice. So we decided to experiment ourselves, and we created a tool within the firm to automate some of those early stage litigation tasks so that we could elevate our paralegal and legal secretaries and associates to do other type of work. And we had no intention of spinning off a new company. We're lawyers and we're just doing fine. There was no need to jump into a completely new sphere. We're not going through any sort of midlife crisis or anything at that point. But we present this to one of our large corporate clients at that time. They love what we're doing, and we asked them, if we were to create this for you, would you be interested in being one of our licensees if we were to split it off as a separate company? Of course, they said, we will be your partners. Right off the bat. And that was about 6 years ago. Since then, of course, now we're in multiple large corporate in-house departments, large law firms, and insurance companies as well. And the rest is history, as they say. Yeah. I warned you. I would give you the long-winded answer to a very simple question. And here it is.
That was definitely a 0.6.
Yes.
So before we jump into the LegalMation, the product, let's get a little philosophical and discuss the bigger topic of adopting new technology in the law firm environment. And, this is a big topic. A lot of people are talking about it, particularly with some of the Gen AI discussions. Now, I know you've experienced some common roadblocks when it comes to lawyers adopting new technologies. So, lack of trust, skepticism, those are often big hurdles. So can you expand on why those mindsets are so prevalent in the legal industry, and what's worked well for you in building the trust that's really needed to overcome that skepticism?
Yeah, it is an interesting question because in my experience, and I've been selling software in the legal space for a very long time, all the things you mentioned are part of it. There's skepticism. We've done it a certain way for a long time. Why should we change that? There's I know better than you because you're not a lawyer and I am. There are other things that go on in the firm that are related to the partners that come into the back office, whereas there's some fears and skepticism in there that we can talk about actually at length. It's a very significant part of it. And I think what you find is it's very personality based because there are camps that will never change. They're not going to change. Some of it is age based. They've just been doing this for so long. They're just not in any mode to change. They're doing well. They've done well. Nothing's going to change.
It would be a risk to do that for them.
It could be a risk to their income. It could be a risk to their lifestyle. I mean, all those things are real. These are all human things come into it a lot. But then there's another camp, and this is sort of the challenge, and where we've had to go find those that say, well, yeah, life is comfortable, but yeah, we need to advance. We need to do new things. We need to be thinking if it's not broke, break it philosophy. Those are kind of the people that we're looking for. And I've looked at my entire career. How do you say, yeah, this is all really good, but somebody's probably going to do it better than us if we don't look at other ways of doing things. So I think that the challenge for us is finding those folks that are open-minded enough to be willing to take a risk to some extent, but a really controlled risk, which is I think a lot about what we're doing. It's a very controlled risk.
Do you have a sense, just from your experience, do you have a sense of, are there certain personas, are there certain sort of types of folks that sort of fit that, if it ain't broke, we need to check, we need to try and break it. Are you finding sort of groups, like any similar characteristics that you could share?
Yeah. If I were to cluster our client base, between the large corporate or insurance in-house staff versus law firms. They're very different.
Yeah.
Because there's different incentives on both sides. I think I'll tackle the law firm sort of persona first, and I will give. Is it okay if I give shout outs to folks? Because there is certainly one person that I like to use as an example, and that's Ron Chapman over at Ogletree Deakins. You guys may or may not know Ron. He's actually in Dallas. He is a very forward-thinking, business-minded attorney. And, I hate to say it, that's a rarity in our industry because he thinks about the big picture. He thinks about the sort of the benefit to the client, which ultimately transfers to a better relationship with the client, longer-term relationship, doesn't worry about what the implications of efficiency tools can have on the in the short term, where you may lower some billable time, where you may actually create more efficiencies which go against the 0.6, 0.1, 0.2s, as Marlene noted. So that is the type of person that I think has been quite successful, and it shows because, I do know for a fact he's a very successful attorney there, and he's got great clients. And that's the type of lawyer that if I were a client and I had a case, a complicated case in employment, obviously, I would go to Ron because not only is he thinking about my business or efficiencies, but that also tells me that he'll think about the best way to solve my problem. And that's what I really care about as a client. So that's the person on the law firm side. In the opposite of that, in fact, Ken and I, we recently had a conversation. Of course, I will not mention the person's name.
I was going to say, it's probably best you don't mention this one.
That one, yeah. On that one, I will not. But it's not. This is probably more the rule than the exception in this particular case. And this is a person who's been very successful, the managing partner of this office. Now is part of a larger office. And when we initially showed our tool as a benefit to his practice and, of course, his clients, and we did a full demo. He saw the output and he was very impressed. He didn't have any questions about the substance. But immediately he asked questions about, but I bill for my time. My associates bill for the time, and how is this going to work? So immediately he went to where most lawyers go, which is, hey, I'm paid for my time.
The bottom line.
Right, exactly. And of course, you can say all you want and say, you could do more. You could do other things with your time and so forth and so on. Don't you have enough to do with your time as opposed to doing this kind of work? But I think folks are built a certain way. If you don't see it right away, if you don't see the benefits of a tool like this right away, I think it's hard to change that behavior, that mindset. But like I said, I think he's probably the rule, not the exception, whereas Ron is certainly the exception. And but I think it's going to change. It's going to start changing as people realize that AI is not. So we talk about AI now still in many ways as a novel idea or something that, I should look into that. It's a new tool. Mm-hmm. No one talks about doing research online or internet. We don't talk about, Marlene, are you on the internet? No one says that today, but remember.
Well, yes, I am.
Well, I mean, just this video, right?
Yeah,
remember,
yeah.
Remember, guys, back in, the mid-90s when, Netscape and just started coming out, people thought, wow, you can look at stuff and you can do some look at cool stuff and you can buy stuff. You can actually do a transaction online. Mm-hmm. People that was such a novel thing. I would say, give it a few years, no one's going to talk about AI or automation or efficiency. They're just going to talk about it as, that's just something that's just part of our workflow. So it will change. I don't know if it'll take a generation, but, there is a saying, right? In the law firm business, change will come one retirement at a time. And I think that's true. I think we need sort of a fresh view on things and, we'll eventually get there. That's the law firm side. The corporate side, I think it's a bit different because now corporate, you saw some of the recent announcements of some insurance companies having to restructure and start laying off some professionals and that sort of thing. well, what better way to increase your efficiencies than to use tools and technology to be able to supplement now the lack of personnel, but more so provide better value to your customers and to your buyers. So it all will sort of mesh together, and it'll come together. There's obviously some casualties of automation, but that also tells us that there's new jobs that are being created and so forth. But that may be a separate topic for another day.
Well, I want to dig just a little bit deeper, and because this kind of relates back to, you've got this spectrum of the way that people approach the problems, and then kind of looking at the typical story that we hear of a lot of tech companies is they identify a discrete problem, but I want to twist it just a little bit, and that is sometimes the change, especially within a legal department or a law firm, starts with identifying what the problem actually is. And a lot of times, primarily, it's a partner or general counsel that, that they are facing that discrete problem. And you finally find a way to identify that, to classify it, to explain it to them. And I'm sure that's something that you work with, one client at a time. So I want to ask if you can give us kind of a specific example of a problem that you've sat down with one of your clients and talked about using the technology to solve that. And then how do you kind of build the understanding of here's the problem first, and then look at the technology to say, okay, ultimately we can apply the technology to solve this part of the problem. Do you have some examples that you can use? Maybe Ken, you want to try that one?
Actually, I want to take your question and just sort of add a little twist to it also, which is, I think in our case, what I've learned, I've known LegalMation for a long time, been with the organization for several months, and what I've learned in a very quick period of time is that a vast majority of the people we're talking to do not even realize that this is a problem. The specific area that we're tackling of automating complaint and discovery responses, for some of the reasons we said earlier, is that people this is the way we do it. We've always done it this way. It's those people in the back office that start the process. Like, it's just not even part of their mindset to even think that this is a problem. And I think one of the challenges that falls on us is to really explain to them that, it is the old way of doing things. It is causing you to be slow. The example Thomas gave earlier of his late night associate there. They're just not thinking that there's anything you could even do about it. And then, so we have to get their attention that there's this thing that you're doing that it is backwards. There are better ways that you can do things. We have a very simple solution that is extremely powerful that you can use and you can implement in a very rapid period of time, that can be beneficial to the organization and to the clients, to whomever. That's sort of the first challenge that we have, is to even get them thinking that way. And I think a lot of folks, and I saw it at the booth, last week. I mean, there were some people that came by and kind of looked at it for a second, and then I think walked away and blew us off. I mean, they just, yeah, okay, right. But then there were some others, and there was one gentleman in particular that I'm thinking about, who I don't think Thomas, he really realized it was a problem. It was actually an associate from a large law firm, came by our booth. This is just a really interesting story. He looked at the back panel of our display, which was very simple. I think it said 3 things on it. I mean, there's nothing to it, but the word response caught his eye. And he literally did the whole cartoon thing with the head, flip and everything. Walked up, I kid you not. I mean, that's what he did. He walked up to us. He asked us what we did. We explained what we did. We gave him a demo, and as we're going to do a demo in a bit, it's all of 5 or 10 minutes to really get a sense for what we do. He looked at us and said, "Why isn't there a line at this booth? This is the greatest thing I've ever seen." But he wasn't even thinking that this even existed till he walked past our booth. And then once he got it, oh my goodness! And then he proceeded to explain the entire. Here's the client I'm working with, and here's the work we're doing. He gave us, he spit out the entire thing to us in 2 minutes flat. And Thomas and I looked at each other and said, "Oh my goodness! If this guy doesn't get started with this next week, there's something cracked in him." but the light bulb just all went on. I mean, it was just fascinating to watch happen. But that just, that doesn't happen every day of the week. We had to fly down, to Florida in the back of an exhibit hall, to see that happen. So that was kind of a long answer to get there. But, once we get them in there, and maybe Thomas, you could take it from here, is, once we get them, rocking, then good things happen.
Yeah. And I want to kind of see if I can direct us in a certain way. And you've got this associate that's doing the work, that's in the trenches, doing this. That again, that's how he's always done it, or how she's always done it. And then all of a sudden, the light bulb, like you said, the light bulb comes on, and so that may work really well for that light bulb to go on the associate. How do you then catapult that into talking to the powers that be to explain to them this is a problem. This is and here's one way. It's driving your clients crazy whether they're saying it or not. And here's a solution to this issue. How do you get it to that next level?
That's a good question. The way I would answer it is the problem has to be recognized by the powers to be. Otherwise, you're never going to get through for them to even listen to what you have to say. In this particular case, just piggybacking on what Ken said, this firm was handling volume. It's not even it is litigation, arbitration cases. On consumer arbitrations, that was high volume. We had no idea that this many cases were being filed against this one particular client of theirs. And it turns out that because they wanted to earn the business, they were handling these on a flat fee basis. Now, when I hear flat fees, obviously then the opportunities open up because the law firms then should be thinking about how to make things highly efficient, because if you already cap your fees or you agreed on the flat fee with your client, it's up to you to lower your operating expenses so that you can increase your profit margins. That should be a no-brainer. In this case, and that's what it was, this associate knew that this was a flat fee. So the moment he takes this, and in fact, we already have a follow-up call set up already for next week because he's already spoken to the higher-ups. And of course, think of it, they already have a flat fee, they have the client. Now, if they could lower, let's say, their actual costs of your associates and servicing costs by even just 20%, 30%, that's directly to their bottom line. And of course, equity partners, or this particular person who may be on a bonus structure, I don't know what the structure is, but the partner who's benefiting from this, that's the one thing that lawyers understand is money and profit and PPP and all the other good stuff. So I think the right use case has to be there. The incentives have to be there. But if you are a firm that handles very bespoke, high-end price-fixing antitrust cases, efficiency is not the first thing on your mind because your clients are coming to you for their bet the company cases. I don't think they'll care about you saving another 10% here, 15% when their company is at risk of dying. So that's sort of it's important to recognize that AI is not for everything, and it shouldn't be for everything. It is for the right use cases and the right practice areas and the right people as well.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting conversation. I have a sort of couple points to hit on based on it. So, Ken, you were saying that this associate that came by didn't even know that a solution existed until serendipity happened and he happened to walk by and had the aha moment. And we in firms we and before everybody we don't do a great job of informing our people about solutions. And before our listeners start throwing tomatoes at me, I know we try. It's like I know we try. We give them food. We go to practice group meetings. We do it on onboarding. We try and get in front of them, but it's that never-ending struggle that this is not their job, and this is to support their job and to try and get that attention. So have you seen sort of good ways do that, or ways that you have seen that work?
Hitting you with a very easy question here, Ken.
Well, no, because I keep thinking
There's
about...
no right answer. I know that, but...
No, but I think that the analysis isn't complete because there's two parts of the story, right? I think you have to talk about both sides of the equation before you answer that question. There's the, attorney, associate, and the partner side of things that we just were talking about. And then there's the part of the firm that does a lot of this work, because they're also part of this equation. Significantly, in many cases, we've found they can make or break our opportunity in a heartbeat, and they can do it for very, I'm going to use the word selfish, but I don't mean that in a very nasty way, but in a realistic way. There's things that those folks do either by perception or reality that they think that their jobs could be at risk. They think that they're doing a lot of overtime work in this particular area, and they don't want to lose that overtime because that's a significant part of their incomes. So, and we've seen, I know one of we did a trial recently for a law firm where at the beginning of the process, the paralegals are extremely excited, and yet somehow over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks, they barely used it. And the only conclusion we come to at the end of it is that somehow they perceived all of a sudden, hey, wait a minute, what am I going to do with my time if all of a sudden these discovery responses take, an hour instead of 4? What am I going to do? Whatever, I'm getting overtime. What, am I going to lose that income? I mean, can't blame them, by the way. I mean, perfectly understandable, but it's also a very big part of that equation. So when we, go to onboard new clients, or we go to, close an opportunity, there has to be comfort on both sides that, from the management's perspective, I'll define management as partner or associate, that they're going to get something good out of this, but they're also not going to create an enemy of the folks that support us every day of the week. So it's a balancing act. I'm not trying to be coy about how I answer it, but each situation we walk into, we have to figure out who the players are and who has, at the end of the day, real power. In the example I just gave you, the real power was actually the folks that were the paralegals and the legal assistants had all the power, and they put the kibosh on it ultimately, right?
All right, so that's interesting, because that sort of deals with my second point, and it's about inclusivity and perhaps fear. Who are the decision makers? Like, it was interesting you bring up the paralegals, because I was going to point out that, generally the decision makers are the folks at the top, the folks who have control of the money. It's like, okay, are we going to spend on this or not? Oftentimes, perhaps not all of the right team members are kind of empowered to have a say, or to sort of think outside the box in terms of different ways of doing things. So what tactics have you found that are useful to get the right people in the room, or even in the process, the overall process, and also get them kind of aware that there might be other ways of doing things?
You need leadership to be strong and very communicative, and able to really talk about why it is they're bringing in someone like us to do this function that they've all been doing for a very long time. They have to be able to communicate that, the reason we're doing this is, we want to streamline this process and save some time because we'd like to bring in more business. Might be one reason, right? We'd like to do more. Or we have more. You guys are already working your tails off, and you can't get it done, and then we're behind, and then we're taking hits because we're behind. This is a way that we can catch up on the work, and I just heard that from an insurance company last week. They're just underwater, and this will help them get that's the biggest thing I think we've learned in the stories that I've heard, is that when there's someone who has a real clear vision of what they want to do, why they want to do it, and they communicate that vision to everyone that can be involved, project goes smoothly, project goes quickly, everybody's, ready to go, there's no problem. When that communication is not there, then, the people that are doing the work, that again, the legal associates, the paralegals, they can stop this thing. They have all the power because no one's helped them alleviate their fears, which are absolutely real. 100%. If someone's threatening my income, essentially, these two guys from this company wearing vests, are coming in to take my money away, it's not happening. It's not happening. I don't care what anybody says. But if someone,
there's got to be an incentive.
100% incentive, or just reality. Here's we're all in this together. Here's where we're doing it. It's going to do. This is going to be good for you in the long run. I'm going to explain to you why. This is going to happen. When that happens, these projects go very, very well. When that doesn't happen, they don't go at all.
All right.
That's what we see.
I was just going to say, just thinking about this conversation, kind of pulling back just a little bit. A lot of times we talk about, getting something in the door, especially sales cycle for law firms, especially, is extremely long. But I have a phrase that I actually haven't used the last few episodes, but I'm going to use it here, is that, all problems are communication problems, because yes, there's decision makers who have the power to bring things into the law firm, into the legal team. So there's that power, but it's the users that can take it could be a multi-million-dollar investment and turn it into shelfware. If that communication isn't there to explain, here's the vision that we have of why we're doing this. Here's the output that we're looking at. Here's where you play a piece in accomplishing that goal. Here's the reward at the end of the day for doing that. And if you don't have that conversation and you introduce not just a new product, but you introduce uncertainty into it, that's when you have the people that are actually in the trenches doing the work can sink that whole project if you're not careful and if you don't have that clear vision of where we're going with it.
100%. And I'm a guy who sold some of that shelfware over the years, and it was just, disappointing to see that it just didn't work out because all the intentions were there, but no one had set the expectations properly. And at the end of the day, life is a lot about expectations. So that's what we need to do a better job of.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the response creator, which is one of the newer tools there that you have at LegalMation. And I want to tie this into this conversation that we're having about how this impacts it, but also kind of broaden it up a little bit and talk about the discussion of generative AI and the concerns and the roadblocks that you encounter when you bring in software or a new way of doing things that create that downstream impact. So, kind of tying this in, how do you address this as far as helping them, kind of create that story to tell the people that are using, this is why we're doing it, this is the effect. How do you approach that?
So with our applications, we actually have two approaches. There's a lot of things that we do that are really smart productivity tools, I call them. We've taken some existing technology that works really well that people are familiar with, and OCRing and some other smart things that have absolutely nothing to do with AI in many ways. So there's something they can do without that. We hope that makes them a little bit more comfortable. But secondly, there are some AI options, as Thomas mentioned. They've been around for a number of years now. We've been sort of battle tested AI, but in our case, we're not looking at the entire universe, to create our AI tools. We're not, bringing in, websites since 2003 and all that stuff. There's nothing scary about it. The only thing that we do with those AI technologies is work straight pointed at the client's own data set and nowhere else. So, the approach we take is you can kind of take this as you want to at your pace. If you want to start off just being very smart about how we, turn, complaints into fully answered responses, having nothing to do with AI, we can do that. That's fine. You don't have to bring in that component to it if you want to ease your way into it. And then we can explain exactly what the AI component is. And again, it only works on the firm's data set. So it's not a scary thing, because everybody's, having worked in the first wave of this stuff, many years ago, and I think that's when I met both of you, which didn't deliver as promises in large part, this is not that. This is a much smarter approach to it, and that's the discussion we have with folks who have that concern. Right, Thomas, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Just a bit more. So one of the challenges, of course, with generative AI, as you're familiar with GPT and even the not just the chat, but GPT 4 and 5 coming up soon, they do rely on large language models and information and data that is publicly available, and it's sort of a massive amount of information, and it can distill for you a bunch of stuff. Our approach is certainly using the same general techniques, but focusing on just clients on historical data. So there are no hallucinations. In fact, the system is never wrong. You cannot make up things because it's not drawing from any other source other than clients on historical prior responses and answers. So, and I do want to give one specific example where this works really, really well. One of our large a large part of our business is working with auto manufacturers, automakers, and law firms that serve automakers with lemon law cases. And, we're in California, and California is the biggest market for lemon law lawsuits for a number of reasons. And our system is able to be trained on a client's own historical responses to discovery requests, RFAs, RFPs, and interrogatories, as an example. And what used to take about 3 to 4 hours per set, now, even with the sort of the process of using our tool and editing and reviewing, is down to less than an hour. Now, that's a huge difference because there are thousands of cases. In fact, we're on track for one auto manufacturer to get hit with, I want to say maybe 3,000 cases just this year alone. So you can imagine the savings that they'll benefit from using our tool. And the law firm's actually surprised that you may not be surprised, but one other automaker is a client because of their main law firm that approached us. And they have proactively actually reached out to us and to figure out how they're going to serve the client better, because they understand, again, the long term. The long game here is to maintain the relationship, to earn more business potentially from the same client with other matters. And so they actually came to us. They signed up. They worked with us to train the system. Of course, the client is fully aware, but now that relationship has been really solidified. And that's an example of the right type of cases where you have a lot of competition among law firms, where you have to be competitive. You have to offer something different other than, hey, we went to the best schools and we have 20 years of experience. Give us the work. Well, if you're answering a request for proposal for a portfolio of cases and all you have is your usual resume, well, I think those days are over. I think you got to bring some different angle, and technology is the great equalizer. And this is why now you have not just are you competing with another large firm, but now you're going to be competing with smaller, more nimble law firms that can do probably as good or better work than you, because technology allows them to elevate themselves, and it serves as a great equalizer. Anyway, another story. I keep dropping stories of clients without mentioning names, which I hope helps, but these are real life examples where, again, the right type of cases, the right matters. And by the way, these high volume cases make up 80+% of litigation in the country anyway. So why are we messing around with the 0.1s, 0.2s when you know that a bulk of these cases eventually is going to come to you in the form of clients asking you, the firm, about what are you doing with tools, or you're going to be, or the worst thing that can happen is they're going to move the work away to another firm that's already using these tools. So your choice.
I see. I love that story of, firms sort of taking an innovative approach to the client relationship and looking, not only at the legal services, but also looking at the business services and the process and sort of like, how do we work together since we're, sharing these documents? How do we, work in the best way to make that as easy as possible? I think that's terrific. Cool. So another exciting thing, and I think, Greg, this is a first. I think it's a first, we're going to do a live demo for the YouTube viewers a little later. So I'm excited about that. But before we get to that, let's hear about what the product does and the problem that you've set out to solve with Response Creator.
So the problem is that answering these documents, responding to them, is by and large, with very few exceptions, a 100% manual process. It involves things like copy and pasting from PDFs that come from the courts into a brand new empty document, or sifting through a maze of templates to try to find the one that matches the one you're working on now, or looking in particular templates where there's a list of answers that's as long as a roll of toilet paper to try to find the one that matches up with the question that you're looking at now. And some of these processes, they may be quicker for complaints, which don't tend to be as long, but boy, if you get into some of the discovery documents, some of those, the responses required number in the hundreds, and it can take days. It can take a day just to set the format of the answer up, let alone even answer the question. Right, so that's going on every day of the week, all the days that end in Y, because we know they're working overtime on Saturday and Sunday, in corporates, in law firms, and even service providers are doing this sort of stuff all over. We just know that that's just a fact. So what this product targets is taking the process that they're doing every single day of the week, often repetitively answering the same kinds of questions in the same style, and allowing technology to be smarter about answering those in a more automated way. It's not an automatic answer. It's not answering and automatically filing. We're not scaring anybody that way. You'll build the answer, and someone will look at it before it goes out the door, of course. But the idea is to, set up the answer format. In some cases, maybe automatically drop the answer in to the right spot because we know what the answer is going to be all the time. The repetitive cases Thomas was talking about before. We know what the answers are going to be, but we still have to answer them. And then in some cases, giving us the option to, plug in language where we need to with just point and click kinds of things, where you are using some judgment because you need to, but at least you're automating that process, and the language that's being used is more best practices, right? It's coming from the way the firm wants to answer it, or the way the client wants the question answered, or maybe it's tailored to a particular attorney's style of answering. I laughed out loud a few weeks ago when one of our trial customers, the paralegal, said, well, I work for two attorneys. They both answer the questions exactly the same way, except attorney B likes citations at the end of theirs. And that person, current process, has to go find the template of the one with the citations and the one without them and drop them in. Well, in our world, we can, tag it and make it easy, and they can just point and click and do that sort of thing. But that's real life. That happens all the time. So that's the problem that exists, and that's the problem that we're addressing and trying to solve.
Yeah. Now, you had mentioned, and we talked, over the past couple of weeks about this, in that the way that Response Creator is set up is, one, it works with your history of documents that you've used. So it kind of picks up that tone of how the firm responds to these types of matters, and you're using the AI to do it. Now, one of the things I think a lot of people are very concerned about, especially with some of the creativity that they're seeing in some of the generative AI tools, for better or for worse, is that, on some of these things, you don't want it to necessarily be all that creative. You want it to fit your format. You want it to give a standard answer, but at the same time, you don't want it to look like you've just cut and paste something, or you want to be able to have that ability to kind of use your own judgment, your own creativity. So how do you set this up so that it can learn and adapt over time to fit those needs and keep that speed of reaction of responding at an acceptable level?
Oh, the one thing that's good about our system is that creativity that you're talking about. Because I don't know if I'm sure Greg, Marlene, you guys have both experimented with ChatGPT, at least the free version, or perhaps you have at your firm licensed some of the paid versions. But you run the same query for the same document. You ask it to summarize, let's say, some document. You get a different answer every time, and that's a problem for lawyers, because it's unpredictable, right? So we don't have that problem because the system will simply pick the best answer from the existing database of prior, already presumably pre-approved and served responses from the past. So you're not going to have that issue, number one. Number two, will the system continuously learn? Absolutely, and that's the difference here, where we can onboard a client in a month or two or less, depending on the workflow, with just a seed set, what we call a seed set, which is a smaller sample of historical responses. And then when users start actively using the system, remember, that becomes essentially training data, because we capture everything they're typing, every keystroke is captured, and that we store, which we then use as training data to propagate back propagate to the data warehouse, and that becomes new response options from which the system can choose from. So it's never making up stuff. It is picking the best options from an existing set. And for legal, that is what lawyers and paralegals need. They need that sort of predictability, the consistency, right? Lawyers freak out when they can't predict what's going to come next. And so that's why, again, it's not for every case, right? It is for the more higher volume matters, which comprises, again, most of the litigation volume in the country. So that's what's been quite successful for us, and we're very excited about that. It was quite painful, actually, to develop the system. It's very difficult, and I think it's going to require. It's always being fine-tuned and improved on. And one thing, though, what this allows then at the sort of higher level, it allows some corporate clients to say, hey, here's what we've noticed. Once you've sort of put this up and we're testing, we've noticed that our own outside counsel has such variations in their responses for the same request or for the same allegation in the same jurisdiction, completely inconsequential, but because we're all artists. Greg,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And we like to sort of, create our own sort of responses because it's artistry. Well, at the corporate level, that's a problem, because oftentimes it may land you in some trouble. And so what you want, a system like this that allows you to create sort of that consistency across the board to pick perhaps the best answer or the pre-approved answers that should be used for certain allegations without all the extraneous things or also remember human, let's face it, a huge part of our business, because we're a service business, there's a human element where, look, I don't function as well at 4 o'clock in the afternoon as I do at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I may rush through some of my answers as an associate. I know that, an associate may be trying to rush quickly through doing their work because they have happy hour coming up in 15 minutes. Well, I mean, let's face it, a machine's not going to care about that. So there is a lot of benefits to that option as opposed to relying on the current state of affairs.
So if lawyers are concerned about losing the human touch in the process, either based on quality concerns or maybe even based on sort of education and learning concerns, you kind of have to do the scut work in order to learn this stuff. How do you reassure them that, AI generated documents, will be of the same quality, and that, people doing the work are still going to learn as part of the process? Where does human review and editing, come into play in that regard?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. So, in terms of the learning process, I think we can look at it a couple different ways. Some of these cases, some of the, the points that are made, they are virtually identical every single time, particularly you talk about these high volume cases where you see the same stuff. The person's going to learn in about 3 answers exactly what he or she is supposed to answer every single time. Whether I point and click and drop the answer in or I manually type it in, the learning curve is pretty quick with those sorts of things. So anytime it comes to something that's not of the cookie cutter variety like that, then you're going to have the opportunity to either put in a nuanced answer, or you are going to type the answer in automatically, because remember, one of the great benefits of our system is that we create the answer format in the first place, which in itself is a drudgery, right? So by speeding up that process, we're opening up a space for you to answer it in several different ways, as you'll see when we get to the demonstration. So, the learning comes in different ways, and learning advances over time, and it's generational, as Thomas mentioned earlier. I don't think that you're going to lose anything. All you're going to do is speed up the curve with things that don't merit taking a whole lot of time on, and give you the opportunity now with more time to learn and spend time on the things that you do need to spend more time on. That's been my take on it.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, mid-90s, we were not given access. First year law school, we were not given access to Westlaw or LexisNexis because the school's philosophy was, hey, you need to learn how to go to the library and pull up the books. And of course, you're happy to do that until you realize that the shepherdized insert was missing because your classmate took it and they were reading it somewhere down the hall and they forgot to put it back.
Yeah.
So
forgot.
Yeah.
And you want to forget that, exactly. So, I mean, then literally, I remember professors saying, "No, this side, this is like a supplement. Yeah, it can help you. This Westlaw stuff can help you later on, but right now you have to learn to do book research.
You got to learn the structure. You got to learn the structure of how everything's organized. Yeah.
And so the answer is now we know that you'd be committing malpractice if you wasted clients' time to go to the library and do your research the old-fashioned way without using Westlaw or using Westlaw or LexisNexis exclusively. Mm-hmm. That's just one example. It may not be a perfect example, but you get the idea. Is how much are you learning from cutting and pasting or going back to old samples and trying to do your sort of the matching process that you have to do. Let the system do it for you, and then when you get a draft and you read through it, you understand. You're going to understand why that response was there, and that's how you learn.
Mm-hmm. Now, when I was at AALL, I heard a really good quote, and again, I wish I could figure out who it was that said it so I could credit them with them. But the quote was, law firms are rushing to be second, especially when it comes to technology. No one wants to be first, but they don't want to be last either. So now that you guys are out there, you have a product like Response Creator that is in the hands of a number of competitors to the people that want to be second. What's been the response so far that you tell them, and what can you give an example of a story where you can share in terms of the metrics that and the efficiency gains that people that have implemented it are bragging about?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories. I mean, I'll start and Thomas will fill in. I mean, the benchmark I use when I'm talking to folks who want to learn more about us is to assume an average of 30 minutes per document prepared saved by itself. Just call it 30. Some complaints may be shorter, some discovery documents may be longer, but let's do some math and call it 30 minutes faster. So depending on your perspective, if you're in a large, insurance company and you're doing hundreds and hundreds of these things, I mean, we just did a calculation for a prospect a while back that it would save them 6 bodies of time in a year at 30 minutes. And they looked at me and said, "You're nuts. 30 minutes is too light." But, I don't want to, I don't want to make it too crazy because 6 was crazy as it was. That's where I start, but we've done some other studies, that make it more specific. That actually makes us confident that 30 is light, but it doesn't make people think we're nuts, that kind of thing. And maybe Thomas, you want to tell a specific story?
Yeah, I mean, I typically use more percentage savings, time and efficiency as a starting point, and that's 50% or more. 30 minutes is, of course, Ken is referring to some of the very high volume, sort of auto car crash cases, very routine type of high volume cases. But I'll give you one example. One of the a large pharma company that was starting to get some lawsuits on one of their products. These complaints tend to be rather long. They're not the typical, 4-page complaint for a slip and fall case or auto accident. Some of these complaints were 190 to 300 allegations, paragraphs. I don't know what that translates to pages, but for this pharma company shared that one of the AmLaw 100 firms that they engaged was billing about 10 hours to draft an answer for each complaint. And they wanted to see what we could do. Well, we got their prior samples, and just as a test, we ran it through, we sort of created the answer tool for them. And even though the system wasn't able to answer all the paragraphs, it was able to answer, let's say, 80% because of the training data, without giving you too much into the weeds. But ultimately, what now they were able to do is from the 10 to even 20 hours of billables that they were paying their AmLaw 100 firm just for the answer, their in-house counsel could do this in an hour. Because they saw, essentially a system would spit out a draft, like a fully drafted answer with each allegation answered, and then a few that were missing, of course, they were very unique, so that they had to go in but even the review time, if you could just quickly review, it was an hour. It's a complete game changer. That's less common than sort of the bulk other type of cases that we handle, but that's an example of the power of a system like this. It doesn't matter how long it is. It might take a little bit longer to process by another minute or so by our system, but that's the type of efficiency that you can gain on one extreme. And then the other extreme, of course, even if you save 30% of your time on your high volume matters, well, you multiply that by the number of cases, the big picture is actually very significant.
So we are at the point in time where we come to the crystal ball question. So we ask both of you to sort of peer into your crystal balls and see what challenge or change in the legal industry is going to happen over the next 2 to 5 years. So, Thomas, I will start with you.
Oh boy, I've answered this in many different ways, and I shift quite a bit, but I think the core prediction that I have remains, which is I always thought, because I was at a law firm, I always thought to myself, you can take the life cycle of a litigation matter. There's no reason why one team, one person, or one firm should handle everything from A to Z. Now, clearly, that's contrary to what everybody would say, which is, wait a minute, you need to know the facts from the beginning all the way to trial. But if you really think about what you can do, and can you modularize the practice of law? Can you modularize the cycle of litigation, as an example, where one firm or one team only does depositions? One team does only written discovery. One team does the initial pleading stage, and one team does the expert depositions as a separate sort of and then one team, of course, does the trials. I think that is possible, and I think that not only creates some efficiencies and obviously savings that come along with that, but I think it gives you the best results possible. An example is, I had a partner who was fantastic at written work, right? Their MSJs and their the pleadings and everything else that they did was just like poetry, fantastic. But you put it in front of a jury for trial, it crumbles. Why is it that person is going to take the case all the way through? And this is why you do have examples where you have the parachuting trial attorneys who come in sort of 30 days before the trial, they get up to speed and they can still try the case. That's just one example of what you could then apply to the rest of a litigation life cycle. So on top of that, that's part number one. There are big chunks of that then that can be handled by a non-law firm entity, right? We already have the ALSPs, alternative legal service providers, and you have there got to be new law firms that are going to be owned by non-lawyers, as you know. So a lot of that is already coming to reality in Arizona. So you're going to have such options. If you're a client, you have so many different options to handle your cases, especially high volume cases. That I think if you're a law firm, I would be more thinking about specialization as opposed to a full service and law firm, which has worked until today. But I don't think it's going to be as lucrative going forward or really as smart going forward.
Well, I like that very much. That is super disruptive. So I hope we get a lot of feedback on that. Ken, what does your crystal ball say?
Yeah, mine is probably a bigger picture kind of thing. I think a lot about what Thomas said before about generational, and I think about the younger people that are coming in now and what their lives have been like for the last, let's call it 25 years, something like that. And so my perspective is having 3 of those children in that age range and watching what's going on with things like the real resistance to return to the office and, the desires of these kids to live a more, quote, normal life and still want to be lawyers and still want to do those things. And also demanding technology to be part of what they do. They don't want to do the grunt work. They think they can figure it out. Like I said earlier, I see it 3 times. I'm good to go. All my kids are like that. I don't need to, practice this. I know what it is. You told me, I got it. There's an element of BS to that, of course, but I think in large part this is the way they are. They're not going to go through all the stuff that a lot of us of a slightly older age went through in the past, where you're gonna do that for a year and get your 10,000 hours and all that stuff. They don't have the patience for any of that stuff because they think that the technologies would help them get where they want to go much faster. And I've even said years ago, I was in another place and I challenged our marketing person to go find me all the law firms they could where the managing partner was in their early 50s at latest, because there's just going to be more technology. It's not, I'm not being nasty about or ageist about it. The fact is they've been exposed to more technology in their lifetimes and can relate to what I do versus someone who just hasn't. And I see that trend happening. You're going to see these younger people in those positions, and they're going to demand a LegalMation come in or all these other technologies. It's not an if, and they're going to look at the firm more than ever and say, okay, what is your technology stack? Are you using this? Are you using that? You're not using that? That's fine. I'll take the offer from the folks across the street. That's a better gig, even if it's for less money. So that's what I see over the next few years. It's going to be interesting to watch what these, dare I say, kids are going to do, and they're going to want to happen, in this profession, and others too, but this one in particular.
One retirement at a time.
Exactly. That is true. I like that.
Much faster now, I think, than before.
So for those who are listening on the audio platform, if you want to see a demonstration of LegalMation, you can head over to the YouTube channel to see more. And for those of you that are watching on YouTube now, you're in for a treat. We're going to do a little bonus content here and do a demo of.
Okay.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we're going to demonstrate 2 aspects of the system here. I'm going to give you an example of processing a complaint response and also a discovery response. And just for completeness, we also do some pricing data analytics as part of what we do that kind of flows from it. But let's walk through a complaint response first. So if I'm working in the system, odds are I have responsibility for a certain state, or I'm only barred in a certain state. We happen to support about 33 states on the complaint side now, which represents most of litigation in the United States. So we tend to cover just about everybody. But you'll only see the list that is relative to what you do. So for this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to process a complaint from the state of Florida. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a document. It's going to go into my database. There we go. I'm going to open that document. And I'm going to process it. And we can have the system be prepared for different kinds of practices depending on what the firm does. In this case, it's an insurance claim. So I'm going to process it. What the system is doing is 2 things right now. Number 1, it's going to take that PDF and it's going to OCR that, and it's going to begin the process of completing it and turning it into an answer format. The second thing it's going to do is it's going to prepare a confirmation page of the main details of this case literally for confirmation. And part of the reason for that is it is as good as OCR has gotten over the years, as long as I've been doing it, it is not perfect. And we want to make sure that there's certain pieces of information that are correct all along. We also use some of this information to extract out because it can be used for other analytical purposes. So here, if the firm is using a matter management system, they can put in a matter number, whatever their format is. And then we're going to roll down the page, check the jurisdiction, check the captioning, all the different things that are important if we're delivering service, that make sure all of that information is correct here on the lower side. We can assign an attorney and all those interesting things. It takes a minute or two, worth doing. Pages aren't exactly perfect again, so OCR just needs to be checked up on, normal part of the process. And when we click go, we're now going to create the answer format. So the way the screen is laid out, as Thomas and James and our colleagues have done as attorneys, is they've tried to lay this out as attorneys tend to work. So what you see first off in the left-hand side, this is the complaint itself in its original format. You always want to be able to refer to that. And it's side by side with the right-hand side, which is the answer format. And here we're going to show a couple of examples of how the system can be used and to the firm's preferences. So in this case, what we've done is we've actually automatically replied to the allegations 1 through 4 automatically. These are fairly generic in the way they're presented. You can kind of glance here at 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so, we would, again, in a high volume situation, we often will answer these in exactly the same way. In this case, this client that we put together sees the questions, they're answered in a certain way, and the answers fill in themselves automatically. Again, nothing is set in stone. If I want to make an adjustment to allegation number 3 here, the response, I can come in here and I can change it any way I want to. In some cases, perhaps, maybe we don't have an answer for that ready-made on this situation. And so I've got a blank spot number 5 that I now can fill in. And so here's where the options come in for our clients. Number 1, with the answer now formatted in all of about 30 seconds, I can simply start typing. I can certainly manually enter information. I can copy and paste from other documents. I can do things, quite easily. Anytime I want to, that's always available. Format it up, make it look nice. The other thing, though, we can do here to make it even faster is we can use our virtual assistant on the left-hand side where the answers have already been canned. They've already been written for this particular situation. You can just drop them in. And again, I'll just pick one here for just for example's sake, but point, click, it drops the answer in. And this list can be customized to the user's preferences. With this gearbox here, we can go down and we can update, add to, we can create additional answers, that are specific to the way that they're working with their client or with the attorneys they're working with. They can make this look exactly the way they want to in accordance with whatever the best practices are, and they can add in anything they like. So once those answers are filled out, and you may have noticed that the system does keep track of the responses that were expected and the ones that we've completed, the other thing we may want to look for is to see if we want to add any affirmative defenses into this response. Well, we've got a list of affirmative defenses available also in the virtual assistant, and these will look familiar to the audience for sure. Let me just pick a couple of these here just to illustrate how the system can work. And you see what it's done is as I've entered them in, it has dropped them into the proper place for affirmative defenses. It has numbered them consecutively as you would expect them to be, and place the text in. Again, you can come in here and you can edit. We may need to fill in a name or a date or something like that, but the form and the basis of that defense are already in place with the proper language. But then we can also do other little things that I think may sound trivial, but I think are actually quite interesting and just get rid of, we'll call them annoyances, which are, what happens if we decide in review that we don't want the second affirmative defense? So we want to be able to remove it quite easily. And what you'll see the system has done is it's removed it. It has moved up number 3 into number 2's position and changed the heading to second affirmative defense. That's a little thing, but it's a little thing that slows things down as we're preparing them in the manual world. So if we're satisfied with where we're at with this particular complaint, we'll simply click go. The system will process the answer, and it will be available here in this download screen. So we can open up as a Word document. We can edit it again. We can forward it to another user if they'd like to look at it and have a final confirmation sign off. And of course, this is a list of all of the different complaints that we've created so far. So that's the process of creating a complaint. The second part of this is to create a discovery response. And the process will be virtually identical. So one of the things we refer to a lot when we're talking to folks that are interested is the idea that if there is turnover in a particular office and we need to train someone new, by the time I'm finished with this, I've shown it once, I'm going to show it again. You're pretty much trained, Greg and Marlene. You're already ready to go. So here, for discovery, this will be an RFP. I'm going to select something from the state of Texas. I'm going to drop this file in to this spot. It's going to be an asbestos case. Personal injury. I'm going to click go. The process is identical. This one will take a little bit longer because there's a little bit more to it. But again, in the scheme of things, the speed with which we're going to create this answer format is a fraction of what is needed in the manual world. We're going to do the same two things. We're going to open up a confirmation page. So we'll make sure that all of the bits that are scraped off of the basics of the case are correctly cataloged. We may need to enter a piece of information as well. So we'll do that in this example just to show how that works. And then we're going to go proceed to the answer format. So here again, if I want to put in a matter number, 123.456, whatever the matter format is, we can integrate this with the matter management system as well. We'll go here, we'll confirm all the bits and pieces. Maybe something's missing, I don't have the responding party, we'll be able to plug that in. Maybe I want to add in the particular attorney, so we'll add an attorney, their bar number will come up, their contact information will come up because we're going to need those on the response format when we put that out. We're going to click go. And it's now going to create a similar but slightly different format. So again, here on the lower left, we have the original. That has been processed. We always have that to refer to. Again, on the right-hand side, we now have the answer format. In this case, nothing has filled in by itself. We're going to answer these one at a time. So let's again walk through the answers and the options of how to do this. The first is to simply manually enter information once again, or copy and paste, or whatever you need to from a different document. And we have multiple clients that have licensed our software just to do this, just to get to this point only. As Thomas mentioned earlier, as we were talking, the idea that just creating the answer format saves a dramatic amount of time, let alone the answers, they simply avail themselves of this option, and it's a winner for them. Second option over here on the left, again, we have some objections that are already written. You'll notice some of them are in green, which means we've seen these kinds of questions before, and what we've seen in the past is that these are the objections that we tend to put in for those things. It's not required, it's not automatic, but they're there and available as a suggestion if desired. And again, it just fills in the answers automatically right here. We can go to another one, and maybe there's some other responses we would like for this particular one. And again, we can drop in whatever we want to there. We can again here customize as needed for the particular person who's using the system. Maybe they're working for different attorneys and the answer is slightly different, or maybe they're working for a client who has a very specific way that they want those questions answered, so we can group them by an attorney name, a client name, what have you. And then when they come back in the system, they all know what the filter icon looks like, and then you can just simply pick the answers that are applying to one of them. In this case, that's one of the ones I picked. All right, so they always have the ability to really customize this to the way that they work. And then with Discovery, we have another option that's available here. Let me make this a little bit bigger. This is our response library. So what we're able to do here is teach the system using a seed set of documents from the firm only. Our software is only looking at the documents that are within this firm's repository itself as they've provided to us to see if we've answered these questions before in these kinds of situations. So when I click into this particular one, it's looking out in the database to see if we've answered it before. You can see here real quick, produce any and all documents related to all plaintiffs. It's the same language over here. And in the past, we've answered this question in this way. We can also tag those questions and answer pairs. This one's relative to furnaces or turbines or products or what have you. You can always refine it a little deeper. But once you're satisfied this is an answer you want, click that answer, drop it in. Again, customize it if you want to, delete what you want to. Nothing final about this. It doesn't automatically create a final version. It sets it up and is ready to go. We again keep track of answers that we've completed versus how many are left to be done. It's great if you need to stop work for something else and then come back in. Once we're finished, we click go, and it processes this document right here. So the process is very similar for complaints and discovery. Again, for training purposes, there's not a lot to do to learn to use the system. The legal part of it and what has to be done, well, that's got to be communicated either from the client or from the partnership or whomever. That's going to happen regardless. So picking up this tool and using it right away is possible. And then compared to many of the other legal technology applications I've been involved with for many years that have taken months of planning and sometimes years to roll out, this is not that. This solves a very, very specific problem, creates a very, very big opportunity, and allows folks to jump on it and start using it in a very, very short period of time. That's my demonstration of those two functions.
That was very, very interesting. And oh my gosh, I can see how it would reduce the time immensely just by using
that. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is that not the fastest software demo you've seen?
That's like perfect. It's like, it's like, I think we were like, what, under 10 minutes on that.
And that's what I tell people, and I think I'm out of my mind. Right?
That's right. Soup to nuts. Came out great. Terrific.
Ken and Thomas, thank you both for taking the time to come in and talk with us, and give the demo. That was great. Thank you.
And of course, thanks to all of you, our listeners, for taking the time to listen to the Geek in Review podcast. If you enjoy the show, share it with a colleague. We'd love to hear from you, so reach out to us on social media. I can be found at Gebauer M on Twitter, LinkedIn, and mgebauer66 on Threads.
And I can be reached on LinkedIn or at Lambert on Twitter or LambertPod on Threads. Thomas, Ken, if someone wanted to continue the conversation, learn more, where's a good place for them to find you online?
They can go to our website. There's a communication tool there. They can see us on LinkedIn. Both Thomas and I are there. You can email us directly. I'm ken.block@legalmation.com.
Or thomas.legalmation.com. But Ken can remain the main contact.
Reach out to Ken.
All roads lead to Ken. at least initially. So
yes.
Listeners, you can also leave us a voicemail on our Geek and Review hotline at 713-487-7821. And as always, the music you hear is from Jerry David DeSica. Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry. All right, Marlene, Ken, Thomas, talk to you guys later.
Yeah, thanks very much.